And we are back. We are back. We are back. I'm gonna start using that one now for the pre-recorded ones. Welcome to the Gospel of Wealth. And as we cover the book Thou Shalt Prosper by Rabbi Daniel Lapin, my name is Munyumba Mutwale. I go sometimes by the name of the futuristic Africanomist. I go by your financial advisor and your investment analyst. And my co-host here is the lovely Bupe The Mindprenuer. How are you doing?
I am doing well, a little tired, but always excited to be back to have these conversations because I just know how much I will get from them and stuff I can use for life. How are you doing, Nyumba? It's been a minute.
Good, good. Yes, we all did take a 1 week break, and now we're back in recording and producing content here again for this. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's I always say tired means that there's work to be done. We can always be tired or we can be anxious. Those
Yeah,
that's the other options. Anxious because there's nothing to do and nothing you have the capacity to earn a living off of. So tired means there's something to be thankful for. That's what I always take it as.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Excited for commandment number
Three.
3. Yay.
Commandment number three for everybody is get to know is know yourself. Okay, get to know yourself, and the first one, if you remember, was view business as positive, as moral, and look at it in the moral context. The second one was increase your network of connectedness because he's really breaking down the thing that you engage in transactions more because you think business is moral. You get to into more transactions because your network is engaged, but you execute better on transactions more when you know yourself. So there's a common thread here about being able to operate in the business world. And when he says business, I would always like to remind people he does not just strictly mean running a business. He means even treat your employment as a business, which is what we're going to get to today. But commandment number three, which is get to know yourself, we're going to cover 5 things which we got from the book. I'm just going to open up that frame in your mind. The first one being know the first frame is getting to know who you are, understanding who you are, valuing and improving who you are. That's number 2. Number 3 is controlling and overcoming yourself. Number 4 is balancing yourself, and number 5 is do not destroy yourself. So those are the 5 common things that the 5 main things that came out of this chapter. But do remember, we're reading the book "Thou Shalt Prosper" by Daniel Rabbi Lapin. We are in commandment number 3. These are the 10 commandments of making money. But still, on that headline, just very quickly, Walker, before we get into the depth of it, the title alone, "Get to Know Yourself and How Far We've Come." What does that mean to you?
Sorry, just ask that again. I missed the last part.
I said getting to know yourself. What does that mean to you as to the story of where we've come from in the past 2 chapters?
That's a really good one. What does it mean to me? I think it's been a lot of staying open and understanding. That is my personal experience with the reading and just with the last 2 chapters and especially wrapping it up into this one. It's about being open and understanding and remaining teachable. That's what it's been. It's not you don't really arrive in this personal growth journey. There's always something new to learn. So it's about staying open and remaining teachable for me.
I like that because that's been my recent, I think my recent theme of
Mm.
wealth building as a journey is that it
Yeah.
is not a discovery; it's a construction project.
Yeah,
Okay,
I love
so
that.
that's
Yeah.
why I've always put there's 2 mindsets most people approach the acquisition of wealth with. One is wealth building, the second is treasure hunting. So you want to focus more on building than hunting. Because everyone has that hunting mentality of looking for this giant pile of wealth somewhere when really it's a
Yeah.
lot of building. And he's also talking about you are the source of wealth, build on it. You are the one
Love
who's
that.
going to build it. So the first thing we wanted to just quickly touch on was the first one of is understanding and knowing yourself. And I think this is the key thing. And he does when he's talking about self, he's not talking about yourself as an individual. I think what he's trying to teach you is the self from the Jewish perspective, the human being. Know what that
Mm.
is. Know this machinery that you're operating. And one of the things he tries to point out is that One, as an individual, you are many things already. When God made you, you are spirit, you are soul, you are body. You're like multiple layers which can operate in different directions at the same time. You can be many things to yourself. You can be a teacher, you can be a leader, you can be a student, you can be a subordinate, you can be many things at the same time. You can be a leader in a home and a follower of God right at the same time, even in the same moment. So there is a duality or multiplicity to who you are. You are both good and evil at the same time, constructive and destructive at the same time. So I like the fact that everyone likes to pigeonhole who they are. But one of the things he's trying to tell you is there are multiple things going on in you at the same time. You're rather complicated. And then the second thing is, but he also then points he also makes the point that one thing leads at a time. When you've got many things in one circumstance, there's one thing that will lead who you are at the time. Are you a scholar and a student? You find a lot of people who are leaders will tell you, actually, I'm a student. I'm constantly studying, but then I'm just relaying what I'm studying to the people who I am leading. So it's a student leader at some point. You can be multiple things, but you should be led by one thing. So the key is what's going to lead us is really where our life choice decision. But you must accept that there are multiple things. You are not good or evil. You are both. All people are both good and evil. All people are both effective and ineffective. You are all those things, but which one do you put in charge? I don't know what you got from that early section.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think he labored a lot also in the knowing yourself to ensure that we understand the parts of what we see and what we don't see, right? So there's the inner self, there's the you, and like you have just in a lovely way explained that one of those parts should lead. And he uses the analogy of the donkey and the person riding the donkey, right? So how are we going to listen to the person on the donkey or the donkey? So it's important to allow you, the person who has the logic and the character, to lead the donkey where it needs to go, because there is a possibility that when we just let our emotions run away with us, we will go and become everything and anything. So for me, it was especially understanding that when it comes to knowing myself, it's not just about the parts that I'm fully aware of. It's the fact that there's even parts that I am not aware of that will affect my life, whether I like it or not. And so I have to be intentional about going there as well. Understanding when I behave a certain way, I need to check, why am I behaving that way? Where did that come from? So I like that duality that he brings about in the book that you have also explained, that yes, we're multifaceted, but what is taking the lead and who is in charge? I think that was really good.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine. We're talking about we posed the question when we were talking in the different study spectrum, and we were saying um, what is does a car work? A car works. A car actually does work in order to move. But does the work the car is doing result in its arrival at the destination? No. That's now the driver. So there's a difference because people have this whole thing of, is it God I should just let work, or should I do the work? But you have to look at your relationship with God as a driver and a car. You are the vehicle, God is the driver. And then he now leads you to that destination. But like a car, you still have to spin your wheels, pump your engine, do all the mechanical things that are required under the instruction of the driver itself. So that's what that I think take allowing what will take the lead is a very important point of everything, and also what is deciding the destination. So it's also about maybe giving certain things different roles. When do you become a leader? When do you become a student? You're a leader in front of the people, but behind the scenes, you're a student studying everything that you need to so that you can come back. So there's also points as to what takes the lead and what doesn't. So I think it's important. I think what he's trying to understand is, and I think the title can mislead a few people because everybody will think it's self-discovery in that the norm of what's talked about. What he's really talking about is understanding the structure of the self as it was created, understanding how the self operates, the same way you learn how to drive a car before you drive it. Now, once you know yourself, the second thing it seems you must do is you must learn to value yourself. And this is where a lot of us get wrong, because we don't. A lot of us are the first point of defeat, and I think is giving you the internal barriers of defeat. The first point of defeat is that we don't understand what we are. The second point of defeat is we don't value what we are and who we are. We have no value for that. So the second point he's talking about is valuing yourself. And valuing yourself firstly understands what value are you going to assign. Now he says you are a student. You must see yourself, regardless of whether you're an employee, a business owner, self-employed, you are a business. You are selling something to someone, you are an organization that is required to deliver to a set of customers. You have a set of investors. People have invested in you. Whether you are a person who has gone to find a job, somebody invested in your education, there are stakeholders to your future, there are shareholders in your life. If you're married, you've got a spouse, that spouse is a shareholder in everything. Your children are shareholders in everything. So you have a stream of shareholders that operate in you. And obviously, as a religious person, God is also a commander, is your board chair, and also the biggest majority shareholder in your life. So you are a business. Therefore, you must manage yourself very well. Manage yourself like a business, whether you're an employee, a business owner or not. You are your number one employee. You must manage yourself like your star employee. You take the fall for when things don't go wrong. You are the one who's in charge of everything. Doesn't mean you do everything, but you are responsible for the outcomes of your life. So this goes back to that self-responsibility importance. And the third point is you are your number one student. You must value yourself enough to teach yourself. So, and then he differentiates between training and teaching, where he says training is about giving you instructions you can repeat. Teaching you is giving you principles you can create with. And you must teach yourself, not just train yourself. Teach yourself so that you can utilize the principles given to you in a creative fashion that manifests growth and expansion, promotion, all sorts of things derived from what you teach yourself. But the first step is value yourself. And I'll say this, Bupe. Whenever I talk, I always tell people the first step to wealth building, for example, is to learn, invest in your knowledge. But usually, when people have got this rejection of learning, it's from one of two things. Obviously, some people have overlearned so much, but a lot more people, yes, there are people who overlearn and they stay learning and they don't implement. Cool. But the majority of people don't learn. And the reason they don't learn is because they don't see themselves as worthy of attaining what they will learn. People will say, in their brain, they're fighting with whether they even deserve wealth in the first place. So why should I go and start investing in learning? So the first thing about knowing yourself and then valuing yourself is you are actually created to attain all those things, but it requires you to see yourself as an entity, see yourself as your star employer, see yourself as the number one student. You are responsible for educating yourself, operating yourself, and training and managing yourself. Yeah.
That's an excellent summary. Yeah, and I was just thinking as you were talking, and when you're talking about, especially when he talks about you are your biggest business, right? So something I'm always echoing in the community, that you are the most important project you will ever work on. Why? Because you're the common denominator in any relationship that you step into, whether it's a marital relationship, a business relationship, an employment relationship. You are the biggest, you're the common denominator. And if everything is not working, again, we have to go back to yourself. Why is it not working? What is going on with you? Where do we need to check where the problem is? And what does that look like? I think is an important conversation to have when we say, I am the biggest business, and especially when we think about it in light of a job. And which is why I think if people don't read any other chapter from 1 to 3 or any of the commandments from 1 to 3, I really, really hope employees can at least look at commandment number 3 and how the rabbi talks about how I am the business. So it's one thing that you're an economist, so I'm a lawyer, right? But what other skill sets do you have? Why is it, he talked about why is it that we have some lawyers making more money than other lawyers, right? But we got the same education. So it's that investment when we talk about what does that actually look like? What training have you got? What skills are you bringing to the table that distinguish you from the next person? And I like that he says, one, you are your most important employee. The other side, you are your most important student. That means on the one hand, you're supposed to be learning. And on the other hand, once you learn, you're supposed to be pouring out what you're learning. But like you have said, a lot of people don't like to learn. We don't keep a teachable spirit, and therefore we get stuck in one place. So you have a person who's held a position, give or take 10 years, and there's some institutions obviously where movement is harder, but where other people are rising, right? Other people are rising and it's the norm, and you are not. It's important to question what value outside of my education am I bringing to the position? And that is an example of how does that look like. And when you have seen that maybe, okay, all I do is the mechanical work of my everyday stuff, maybe I should be looking into how can I improve perhaps my people skills? How can I improve my communication skills? How can I position myself to be more visible? And that's what it means. And the student side of that is, okay, what do I need to learn? What do I need to read? Who do I need to see? Where do I need to go? So I just thought it's important for us to talk about the how of what that means. Yeah.
And I think I'll just add to that. I think because if I just to go back to what he's saying is that if you view yourself as a company, as your own business, a business requires investment. So if you look at the requirements of all three of those, if you see yourself as a business, your star employee, and your student and your number one student, all those require a business must be invested in, an employee must be managed, and a student must be taught. So if you see yourself as those things, you also assign responsibility to yourself to make sure those things get the three things they need. So he's saying invest in yourself, manage yourself, teach yourself. These are three things you must do in order to gravitate. One thing I also want to add to this is some context. As much as we, Wupe, are raised in the generation where there's companies and entities all over the place, we must remember that the company is actually a relatively new invention. It comes from Dutch law. The Dutch, when they were the number one economy in the world back in the 1600s, they invented companies, and that's when they invented companies, publicly traded companies. All this thing comes from Dutch law. They in fact even invented the stock market. So the whole system of the financial system comes from Dutch capitalism, which was in charge of the world from 1600s to about 1800s. Pre 1600s, where all the scripture is written, everyone was a self employed entrepreneur. If you were a smith, you were a metalsmith on your own, and your children were your employees. If you were a farmer, you were a farmer on your own, and your children were your employees. So a lot of history is built on self employed entrepreneurs who had to invest in themselves, they had to manage themselves, and they had to train and teach themselves how to do these things excellently so that they could become better in the marketplace. So he's also talking from a context where this was written was that was the norm. When you finished your whatever education you got, maybe you got training directly from a parent, because remember that even the school system is also a new thing. This life we have today of schools and company jobs are new. Throughout the majority of history, you were born, trained by your parent to go into the job, into the working world that they had, and then you continued in there to do things a little bit better than them, and you had to constantly learn from them and manage. That was for the greatest part of history. That's been the way humanity has operated and the economy has operated. But the problem is that because we've now gone under structured education and structured employment, we've abandoned the principles of having to teach yourself, invest in yourself, and once it manage yourself, that comes with the self-employed, self-educated cycle that most people went through. And I think this is where a lot of people are struggling, and we're getting this separation big time in the world. I don't know if you got anything to that.
Yeah, I like that last point you bring about and about the training yourself, where we take personal responsibility. A lot of the time, we find that companies, I mean, not to take away from companies and institutions, they should train their employees to grow in whatever field they are operating in, right? But primarily is what you're saying. It is your responsibility because you are the one who wants to get ahead. So if you want training, and in this time and age of information, I don't know if there's any training you can't get for free on social media, right? Even just on the internet, even just even if you can't get into the depth of it, there's at least the basic of it that you can get. If you are struggling with people management, there's so much information. If you are struggling with, I don't know, computer and presentation, there's so much information. So we need to get back to a place like you are saying, where we take responsibility for investing in self, managing self, and teaching self, so that even when your employer comes to you and you need training, you're moving into a deeper level of expertise than being a beginner. So I think we must be intentional about that, especially for people who well, like me, I forget, for us who are in full-time employment, because that responsibility weighs heavy on us more than it does on the employer.
And just final thought to that is that the reward structures of workplaces often lean to those who manage themselves well, train themselves, they manage themselves well, teach themselves, and they invest in themselves. You'll say, how come me and this person have the same education? We started together, but how come they're getting promoted faster than me? Well, perhaps they manage. You can always point at one of the three. They invest in themselves a lot more. They manage themselves a lot better, or they teach themselves a lot more. What these are the hidden things, the unseen things. Let's go back to that seen and unseen thing.
Yeah,
The
unseen, yeah.
unseen things that we're not paying attention to about how people treat themselves, because you will treat yourself with that respect if you assign that level of importance to who you are to your journey. There's an old saying. I know it comes from Spider-Man, but it actually has a lot of old origins in Jewish scripture and that stuff. But it's basically, with much power comes much responsibility. And so, what I always say to people is, if you want power and influence over the direction of your life, no matter who has done what to you, this is the big mistake of today is, you wronged me, so you must fix what you did wrong to me. That's a very dangerous view. As moral as it sounds, what you're unlikely doing is you're assigning responsibility over people, over your life, to the people who wronged you. And that's a very dangerous way to live your life. So if someone stole from you, it's their responsibility to give back to you and to better you. If someone hurt you, it's their responsibility to unhurt you. I think we have to be very careful. Two things can be true. Someone else can be responsible for your pain, but it's your responsibility for your progress. Always keep your progress under your responsibility. Never assign it to anyone else, regardless of who is at fault. Never assign fault and blame, assign fault and responsibility together. I think that's the most dangerous thing that a lot of people today do, is that whoever's fault it was for what happened to me is responsible then. So if the company is keeping me down, they're responsible for training, teaching, investing in me. It's their responsibility for my journey. And that's exactly how you stay in the exact same place for years and years without anything. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to agree. And well, just to go back to the fact that we're talking about worth, that's how worth is built, when you take responsibility and invest in yourself. Because another person can't see where you want to go, who you want to become. You're the only person who has the vision for that. And so you are the one who has the responsibility, not to take away from the fact that other people will hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But the truth is, even if they do, for instance, apologize, it's not like they can erase the memory of things they said, or erase the memory or the feelings that you feel that came from that. You just have to take the responsibility, like you have said, for your progress, or whatever that looks like. Whether the apology comes or not, you move forward. Whether they invest in your training or not, you invest in yourself. And the way the world works is just funny. People who believe in the power of the universe, right? It's how they say it aligns. You position yourself for somewhere where you want to go. Help seems to always just come and you go there. But if you sit and wait, and as believers also, it's that Matthew principle about which is the basis of all the work that I do, honestly, is God will call me to account for this. And it's not going to be enough for me to say, oh, X and X said that I can never be that person, therefore I sat back. he will say, I did give you these talents. What did you do? And today, the preaching was about pressing toward the mark. And I feel like that's such a good line. We must always press toward the mark, and all these things that happen just are sort of distractions, but the progress is our responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with hopefully we've all picked up on there, value yourself enough to take responsibility for yourself. Value don't I know in today's world we the whole value yourself conversation is demanding other people value you. They will or they won't, and we'll get to that, and there's an actual part that touches on that. But and you have zero control over whether they'll value you or not, but you are the first one who can value yourself. And the best sign you can value yourself is invest in yourself, teach yourself, manage yourself. That is absolute. Now, talking about self management, the next pillar he talked about of getting to know yourself was overcoming yourself. And he talked about the importance of leading with your mind, and being very careful of being led, of trying to maybe always keep your emotions or subjective. Now, this is very difficult because it by no means encourages emotional suppression. It just means subjugation of your emotions to principles and thinking clearly. Now, I'll start with a simple point that if you think of a car, your mind is the steering wheel and the pedals. Your heart or your emotions are the fuel tank. And a lot of your energy comes from your emotions, but a lot of your direction comes from your mind. And you have to segregate those duties very carefully, because this is what I used to understand. If you have no emotion, you're all steering wheel, no fuel. You're still not going to go anywhere, or you will run out very quickly. You can just use some momentum very quickly and stop. I can just roll you down a hill if you've got no gas in you. But if you're all emotion, imagine driving a car that's full of gas but has no steering wheel. That is a crash waiting to happen. That's a very dangerous thing. So you have to respect both your heart and your mind. And when it comes to personal decision making, your mind leads. It is important to have the buy-in of your heart. It actually is very important to have the buy-in of your heart. I don't think he stressed that. This is a point I'm adding in. But what he's also trying to talk about in terms of overcoming yourself is, one, understand your duality. There's a part of you that's reasonable, and then there's a part of you that's impulsive. Both those exist at the same time. And you don't want to allow the impulsive one to always make those decisions. So understand it as a war. And therefore understand, how do your emotions work. I've had this conversation with friends and so forth when they want to make a big decision. And I'll always say, sleep on it, give it 1 week. If it's a big decision, like a partner commitment, a big job, or anything, sleep on it. If a week passes and you still are on the same path, then obviously this is something beyond the fleeting emotion. If a week or two passes, this is why you can't just say to someone, "I'm in love. Let's go and get married next week." That's insanity. That could be, you could be thrown by some feelings there. Then the moment those feelings fade, you start to take a good look at who that person is, and then you realize that. So this is why, even leaving work, if you're leaving a job, you want to really give it a week, 2 weeks, a month. You need to think this thing through. Not, you've argued with your boss and I quit. That immediate reaction, you regret that horribly. So you want to make sure that you overcome your impulses. So he talks about the analogy of a person riding on a donkey. And he talked about that, whether it's Abraham, whether it's Jesus. Now, in the Talmud and the Torah, what that means is it's overcoming your emotions, mastering, because the donkey is actually the mule, the body that we move a lot. It represents our emotions. But we riding it means we are controlling our emotions. So we're not disregarding, we're not saying, this donkey is dangerous, let me throw it away. But we are controlling it and riding it and utilizing its energy, but we are controlling the direction with which it is going. So that big battle, I think this is the biggest battle of them all. And then finally, he talks about character strength. Having character strength means being able to resist the temptation of running according to your impulses. So if you want to know yourself, know that this is the biggest battle in your life. being able to overcome your impulses and urges in order to make clear and principled decisions, not disregarding your emotions, but making sure they're subject to clear and principled decisions. For us Christians, it's the scripture, making sure that our decisions are made according to that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think this was, no, you know what? Let me say. I was about to say this was my favorite part in this commandment, but then I had so many. I got to so many parts in the commandment. I love this. I love this. But I just, when he talked about this, it's very easy for someone to sit here and listen to this and say, "Oh, you know what? I am really in control of my emotions." But when you really think about it, this is again another struggle that we go through every single day. It's in how we deal with people. It's in how we, let me give it one that is closer to home for you who is doing finance, right? Every time, if I think even when we sat down and I'm sure when it will come around. So when I sat down and asked you some questions, it's where my desire is here, but but my income, my discipline, I don't know, my everything is like here, right? It's way lower. And so, for instance, when it comes to finances, it's true I want to own a private jet, right? But is it realistic for me to own a private jet in 2 weeks, a month, or even 5 years? What is the one side of what is my discipline and income and earning capacity, which is the desire and the donkey, versus me who wants the private jet? So desire, it always feels like when we talk about desire, we're looking at people perhaps who are struggling with addiction, right? But it shows, this example you've given shows up in our everyday lives, like when we go and get a loan to buy a liability, for instance. I've stolen money from the future to gratify a certain emotion now. So I want to drive I don't know, a brand new vehicle, a showroom vehicle, right? And I buy it on a loan. So that is a desire that is common in each one of us. And it's easy to think, oh, because that person is struggling with pornography or alcohol addiction or drugs, that they don't have control over their desires. But I could be steep in debt because of a desire that I have not put in check. Another example is, because I'm always dealing with women in their 30s, which is also my bracket, is just because someone comes to you and they say they want to marry you, they will automatically be the one because this person has said the word marriage. So it's not, there's an emotion that's not in check there. So you've been thrown away. What are the values and the principles of what does marriage really mean? Our values are aligned. Are we going in the same direction? But because now I'm in my 30s, people want to come and eat rice at the wedding. When someone just says marriage, it's like, this is the person who fix it. So there's everyday emotions that we need to be keeping in check that lead us in a ditch in the future, that right now, looking at us, we're very composed and together. But it's only in 10 years or 15 years when we look back and say, oh, that emotion wasn't put in check. It's the debt that we have, that when we're in retirement, we don't have any money to live on. Because when we were younger and in our prime, we lived our best lives, going to the clubs, buying cars we can't afford, always in debt. Now your gratuity is coming, you are paying debt, or your pension is coming because you don't have any skills for money management. It all goes under. So we are all dealing, I just wanted to make sure we have that point, that we're all dealing with emotions right now that we need to keep in check. And we shouldn't lose sight of this, thinking we're talking about people in extreme situations, because it's all of us right now. And a closer example to me is, I don't have children yet right now. And then I decide, oh, I want to adopt. And adoption is such a big deal. For some people, they've ended up neglecting children who they adopted based on a void, because they wanted to show people they could nurture and care for children. Once they have their own kids, they abandon an innocent child. So right now, looking at it, it looks like, oh, it's a noble thing. Let's adopt a baby, because you're thinking it's a nice thing to help someone. No, adoption is raising a human being like your own. So there's a lot of emotions in everyday life that people are not keeping in check, that will only come and manifest later. And so we're not talking about extreme emotions. We're talking about staying aware of everyday emotions.
And it comes from, if you understand yourself, if you understand that you have that
Those
duality,
emotions. Yeah. Yeah.
from the beginning, then you
Oh,
understand that I may not have manifested what that person have, but I sure do
yeah.
have the capacity. And I think what you need to understand is everybody, whether you're seeing a prostitute, a murderer, this is why Jesus in the Bible says, if just by having anger you have the capacity for murder. He's trying to tell you that just given the right circumstances, you are capable. If the right if you know, the environment hits
Absolutely.
you, are absolutely capable of
Absolutely.
doing what that
Yeah.
person did. You've
Yeah,
just been
which is why we're
spared by
told
God.
forgive, forgive, because we are not void of that capacity. So we tend to look in extremes. So I'm just inviting everyone to just bring it close to home. What are those desires you have? Because don't look at another person and think you're better than them just because they're found in an extreme situation. So I love that. I really love that. And another one that I wanted to comment on was on the character strength and how he explains that this is a muscle that we build. So the same way I've talked about on the other side of it, the opposite is true. So maybe you are that person who is struggling with these extreme emotions, or you're already caught in debt, or you're people just don't know yet, and it's about to manifest badly. It's important to understand that character is a muscle that we build. If I go into the gym today, no one is going to see that I went into the gym today, but 6 months down the line, you're going to see my biceps, you're going to see my six pack or whatever, 6 years, 1 year, six down the line, you're going to see the work that we put in. And character is such an important asset. And character usually is, what is the reputation that you hold? Who are you when people are not looking? And that's what you bring to the world. But also we have to understand the grace that comes behind that, in that it's not an overnight success, and it's something that you build on. And this part reminded me a lot about atomic habits, just doing little things consistently in the direction of where you want to go and who you want to become. And then over time you look back and you're like, oh my God, we are here. So it's not jumping the gun, but it's also not being on the opposite side, like I had explained.
I love that because there's something that he pointed out where he said, um, more people are willing to forgive ignorance than they are willing to forgive character. Because character is such a rare commodity. Everyone has slip ups in knowledge, and the thing is, knowledge information is so
Mm,
readily available around the world that even if you got it wrong today, you can pretty much just Google it and pick up what the right answer is in a minute or
true.
two. But character is so rare to find people of sound character that it's valued
Mm,
so much more. Whether it's at work, whether it's in business, and even if you think of yourself as a business, if you truly must look at the character of yourself as a business. What do people rely on? Why people must ask the question, why are people willing to spend more money on other products than they are, even in a tight inflationary economy? Why are certain brands always there? Because there's a specific integrity, there's a trust they've assigned to those brands. I will pay money and know that I'm getting delivery on this point. I will pay money and know that I'm getting all of this, and I'm safe in believing that. He also pointed out that good character makes you more sound and predictable in your transactions and decisions. And when you're predictable in your decisions, people tend to do business with those who they know they can predict their behavior a lot more. We're more
mm.
comfortable knowing that if I put in this is what's going to come out. And as much as we may seek surprises in this world, we don't want too much surprise.
We want
I,
them
I
in
was
exception. That's
I,
that's
I
what
was
makes them special. They are not every day.
it's in other words, it's instability. Surprise every day is instability. I talked about recently that like the fastest way a woman can detect her husband is having an affair is the moment he starts to change his patterns a lot. The moment he starts to see different dress codes, different moods, all these things from a person who's been rigid and stable their whole life, then
Yeah,
magically they just turn in one moment without your suggestion or anything. It's like the woman's antennas just go off and say,
that's
ah,
there. Yeah,
there's
there's
another woman
something
involved
there.
in
Yeah.
this. And so, like that's why I said, if you want to spook your wife, the first just randomly change your habits. Like you spook her right there. But what it means is that the world wants what we call familiar surprise. 90% familiar and predictable, 10% surprise. That's really what we're looking for in anything. Just be surprising at the fringes, but stick to your routine so I can predict who you are. And I don't want to have to keep guessing because that makes me anxious. So even when people are doing business with you, They want to know who you are and that you stick to a certain amount of principles. So character is extremely important, but it's built by having stability in your decision making, and that requires head decisions more than these decisions. You can have this energy, but you need to keep the decisions need to get filtered through here. This is why time must be taken. Change of environment sometimes must be taken. If you want to know if you want to change jobs, go on a vacation for a bit. Take a 2 week break or a week break somewhere, and then see what your mind get your mind clear so that you can make those decisions carefully. But head decisions are much more important for that. So it's just some of the things we wanted to add. Now, the fourth and biggest thing he talked about in this section was balance yourself. So we've understood ourselves, we've valued ourselves, we've overcome and controlled ourselves. Now we must balance ourselves. So he talks about the fact that as human beings, we have four main driving forces and our motivators. And I like these and I like the quadrant. If you really pick up this chapter, there's a model that's put in there that comes from their spiritual teachings, which breaks down four sets of drivers. But as human beings, what he said is, as human beings, we have physical needs and spiritual needs, and the world delivers for our needs in physical ways and spiritual ways. So he says what you have to look at is what meets my spiritual needs in a spiritual way. That's one driver. What meets my spiritual needs in a physical way? What meets my physical needs in a spiritual way? So always put that puzzle together. You get four outcomes. And he says the four main drivers are wisdom, wealth, the esteem of others. So it's wisdom, power, wealth, and the esteem of others. And wisdom is a spiritual need met spiritually by the world. In other words, it's unseen. People don't see wisdom packets going into your head and manifesting in your head. You just become wise over time through your unseen response to interactions. Power is a spiritual need met in a physical way. You have influence over a physical area or a physical group of people. Power is attained. And I always want to remind people, look up the difference between strength and power. It's actually there in Merriam Webster. Strength is what you exert, power is the influence you have over the outcome. That's why my brother who was preaching one time said, strength is physical, but power is spiritual. Because that's power comes from God. It says the power is what actually dictates what the outcome will be. Because it even says in the Merriam-Webster, it is the ability to influence an outcome and influence a group of people. Wealth is a physical need met a physical way because you need to meet your needs. And he also said define wealth differently. While the esteem of others, which I like this, I like this is because there's this. He actually dealt with self-esteem versus self-respect, and that's a very big different way of thinking about it. So you can have self-esteem, but the problem he says with self-esteem is it's not tied to achievement. It's not tied to certain things. He says esteem is what you must get from others. Respect is what you give to yourself. And you must respect yourself. That's also valuing yourself. You must respect yourself. Okay. And that you do and say, look, I will work on myself. And then once I have achieved these things, that's good. And then esteem of others often comes through achievement. He says, if you reorient yourself from self esteem to self respect plus the esteem of others, you have a tendency to actually be more achievement oriented rather than you just have self esteem where you have expectations only and no achievements. So I like this because it kind of now flips it around on you and says just be very careful of just having these expectations on everyone with zero achievement of yourself and zero expectations of yourself. So therefore, respecting yourself, which is still a very important thing, allows you to then say, but then I need to deliver. If I respect myself, I need to deliver. Because you have to see yourself, you have to value yourself and see yourself in that respectable light. So these are four motivators. One other thing I wanted to add to this is, which I got from it without getting too deep into it, is that you need to have all of these things. He was very careful to say you can't spend your life pursuing one because the others will break you down. If you pursue wealth, no wisdom, then that's dangerous. He said even the pursuit of power should not be seen as negative because he said as Jewish people they understand the fragility and the difficulty of life. So, because you understand life is fragile and it's difficult, there is a need to have power over certain things. If you misuse power, that's a different thing, but there's a need to have it in the first place. So, but you must pursue all these things equitably and equally. Give them your equal. And he says they're also intertwined. You may find that wisdom is the requirement for wealth. You may find that power is the result of wealth as well. Wealth and wisdom applied together. So these things build into each other. And if you have wisdom, it's also easy to get the esteem of others. So you may find that sometimes it's also just a case of making sure you pay attention to these. And often, I'll say one thing on top of that. Often, Wupe, our biggest drivers in life is where we're lacking in these areas. You'll often find the thing that's pushing you the most. You'll find a person who has wealth is now pursuing wisdom because that's what they feel they're lacking. And human beings always look for the empty pockets in there, but they start with the physical, then they go to the physical, spiritual, then spiritual, physical, spiritual, spiritual. But really, I think what we must be very careful of is pursuing wisdom last. A lot of us wait until we have everything else to start pursuing wisdom when we should be pursuing wisdom first because it unlocks a lot of the other things. I know I went on there, but I want your thoughts.
Oh no, I love that. It was so good. I love this part in the book because it first dives into the psychology and goes back to that knowing yourself first, because the facets of who we are that we don't understand. So some things are happening to us and we don't know where it's coming from. So he goes deep into psychology with Maslow and the guy before him, the guy who everything was happening. Yeah, that one I liked him too. But I like this one when he talks about, and I'm just going to read it the way it is. He talks about how these 4 areas of our satisfaction, and I like to go in the stages because when the 4, like everything you've explained so well, I like where he started from, where he says the 4 areas in which we desire satisfaction is a sense of personal growth and development, then a feeling of expanding personal power, which diminishes sense of vulnerability and of being victims of capricious fate, the basic necessities of life, including food, clothing, and shelter, and the esteem of other people. Now, why I like this first level at the top, where it talks about a sense of personal growth and development of ourselves, and in order to understand how the world works, and especially how you have explained that one always feeds into the other, right? So we have this desire to feel like we are growing, but it goes back to that point where we don't remain teachable and then we don't learn, right? So what we don't understand, and that's the thing about understanding self, the reason why people don't pursue knowledge or growth is they don't understand that progress is actually what makes happiness. That if you actually lean into what you feel uncomfortable to do, that's where you're going to find that satisfaction. E.g., pick up a book and read something you don't understand but you have interest in. That will make you happy. But people don't pursue that, right? But it's one of the areas that if you pursue, that happiness that you're seeking, that you think if I had more money, I will have, comes from a small thing like, oh, now I'm open to how the world works. Now my anxieties are not there anymore because I know these are the weather patterns. It will rain tomorrow. Tomorrow I will have sunlight, and therefore I can plan my life, right? So we want to have a sense of personal growth and development so that we understand how the world works, which feeds into the fact that when I sit and have discussions, for instance, with you, Munyumba, because now I know a bit about finances, there's a sense of esteem in our exchange that will happen because you perceive me as an equal, or at least there's somewhere where we have a meeting of the mind. So there's an esteem that I give to you, an esteem you give to me, and the friendship, relationship, business partnership works. Because why? I pursued personal growth, and now there is a system that is inbuilt in you to esteem me, whether you want to or not. And it's not something that you're thinking, I want to esteem Bupe. No, it's because whatever it is that we have an exchange about, there are systems inside that we have developed that give us that. And then a feeling of expanding personal power, which diminishes our sense of vulnerability. So I like in the book when he talks about how if you have a car and you can drive to work, congratulations, you have power. If you have a job and you can pay your bills, congratulations, you actually have power. But a lot of the time when we think of a measure of power, we're thinking the level of presidency, CEO. We're thinking really high and therefore assume we have no power whatsoever. And that is not true. You have power, and especially when you put it in comparison to another person. So when you have a job, for instance, you don't have the vulnerability of thinking you're going to starve or that you're going to sleep outside or you're going to be homeless. You have that power. So there was also the sense of it is important to have a balanced view of what power means. You have to have a healthy view of what power means. There can only be one president at a time. There can only be one CEO in a company at a time. So if you're going to create a miserable life because you're not in that position, you miss the opportunity. This one, which fed directly into having the basic necessities of life, which I won't belabor because I've already explained. If I have this power, I can wake up and go to my job. I'll be paid at the end of the month. It means that I will have food on my table. So I thought this was a very powerful model that he used, and it feeds right into what you explained about the wisdom part. Do you have wisdom enough to know to practice, for instance, gratitude? Yes, I'm not the CEO of a company yet, but I have a job that gives me an opportunity to practice various skills that can take me there if that's where I want to go. What power do I have, rather than thinking, oh, but I'm not the CEO, or I am not the department head or whatever. Right now, maybe I'm an advisor, or I'm not sure what that looks like in another institution. I'm an advisor, and if I want to go there, what power do I have? Who can I talk to? Where can I show up? Who do I see? Okay, you're not wealthy just now, but what does your income do for you? What talents and gifts do you have that you can invest in, that can help you grow and become who you want to be? And then all these things, when you have a balanced perspective of all these things, naturally your esteem goes up, and no one even has to say, oh, well done, Bupe, or well done, Munyumba, because there's an inherent mechanism already that helps you show up in public or anywhere you go confidently, that people can't help but esteem you. There are a lot of people who have a lot of money but are timid. No one knows that they have that money, right? So they won't get the esteem. They'll be looked over. But because of the internal working that is going on the inside of you, you show up well. So I absolutely, like I said, in this commandment, I was like, this is my favorite part. And I'm like, no, this is my favorite part. So it
It's
was
all
really good. I
personal
really
development.
enjoyed it.
Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll add to, there's something, Mlenga, and for those of you who may not, who know when I mentioned that that's my late wife, she used to say, no matter what position someone works, they are a king in a house somewhere. There's a house they walk into where somebody washes their hands before they eat a meal. There's a place they go where somebody, you may call someone a garden boy, but they're someone's father and someone's husband, and they have dominion over some piece of the world, no matter how small it is.
No matter how
And
small.
and that's an important way to view power. That you don't have to view, a lot of people look at dominion over masses or domination. When people think of power, they think of actually of domination. But truly, power first is just power over yourself. In fact, the Bible even says, better is one who can control themselves than one who can rule a city. So if you can just control yourself and have your environment controlled, and you can take care of that which you have responsibility over, even if it's just feeding two people, taking care of a spouse, that is power. That is a great power you need to treat with the utmost respect. In fact, in God's eyes, that's the most important power you will have. No matter how small it may be talked about in society, just that. If you may not have children and a spouse, you have power over the education that you intend. You have power over the time you utilize every single day. So I really would like to just stress that point, that no matter what I really, Whoopi really knocked on a very important point, that you shouldn't look at key positions and billionaires and billionaires, everything. This is why Dave Ramsey says a lot of times, he talks about, I'm developing you to be a millionaire. Billionaires are a different set of rules. But just to be this, it's not poor to be a millionaire. It's not, I don't know where this came from, because we're obsessed with topmost. But there's a lot of dignity and decency in this next level, in the millionaire space. There's a lot of dignified living that comes there. And you may not be the person who's got the feature of the magazine, but guess what? You have the esteem of many people. You're dependent. And secondly, if you truly want power in society, people need to depend on you. Because I'm telling you right now, we had a water. I've been home sometimes where the water breaks. Okay, okay, you've had a water problem, and guess who's the only person who can fix that? It ain't you. It's the plumber. Okay, the very person who you may look down on, you will have no water to do bodily and daily functions in your
Yeah.
whole day until a plumber walks through your house and fixes it. And there he has power because he has responsibility and he has abilities to deliver on those responsibilities. And so, one of the most important ways to garner power around this world is actually to be needed by people and to be depended on. And not to do it nefariously, but just through service delivery. It gives you power. Just delivering well and being trusted and dependable gives you a lot of power. So I think we want to really always look at that point. And he also labored on the fact of power as an important thing. And the final pillar, if I may just go to it, is don't stop destroying yourself. And he talked about the importance that if you want to do positive things in your life, you first have to stop doing the negative things in your life. Like you can't say, I want to build wealth. Okay, you need this is what Dave Ramsey will say. First thing you need to do is you need to stop spending more than you're making. Like first thing we need to get a grip on before we even talk about dismantling debt or anything, let's stop adding to the problems. Okay? So the first thing we need to do is to stop the negatives, stem the flow, or what they talk about in the medical space as stop the bleeding. Once you can stop the negatives, then you give room to build the positives. So you have to, in Christianity, we'll say, even, what's his name? Rick Warren says in The Purpose Driven Life, he talks about the fact that you need, in order to say no to the devil, you need to occupy your mind with Jesus. So you need to occupy your mind with the right to say no to the wrong, but you first also have to stop the wrong. Like you have to stop it and then fill yourself with what is righteous and what is good. And one of the things he really labored there is uncontrolled anger. That's one thing you really have to you really have to take control because there are two dangerous emotions in this world. The two most powerful emotions which we see even in marketing is anger and fear. If you look at any marketing advert or anything, they play on your fear and they play on your anger. And those are two things that are often played upon, and that gets you to act impulsively. In fact, if you want anyone to act impulsively, we'll always say anger blinds you, fear paralyzes you. And these are two things you want to try and avoid. So, as people, that's one thing we have to pay attention to. Stop destroying yourself by allowing anger and fear to dominate you more than you can control yourself. So, I think those are key principles I wanted us to just look at as the final point of all of this. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad that you dived into it. And I just wanted to say that point by Mlenga. I said, I wish StreamYard had emojis. I'd be like blowing up the screen with fire emojis because it's such a fire point. And it went back to the point about, we have to have a healthy perspective of power. Because if you neglect it, you are a king somewhere. You don't have to be a king everywhere. And just pay the price for what it is that you want, if that's what you want. But also, just to wrap it up, I like when you're talking about before the point about the last point you made about managing anger. He talks about being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are not honest with themselves, and that's why they're in a ditch. And especially again on the subject that relates to finances, people are living outside of their means, borrowing, trying to prove. And in my circle, the legal circle, it's even bigger. So if Council X is driving a Benz and they have built a house. Therefore, a lot of people now will want to rush for that status. Just be honest. What is your path? What is that other person doing? Are they doing legit things that you can afford to do what they do? So I think being honest with yourself is a very, very important key to have, and not destroying yourself, like you have said. You have to stop the bleeding, stop the things that are not correct for you to get ahead. And what does that look like? First, like I was said, have an honest conversation with where you are, but also like, what's his name? The guy who did, I think, Napoleon Hill. definiteness and purpose. If you don't know where you are going, even if today I tell you that, saving money, investing money is not good, and you're not clear why you're doing that, chances are it will exhaust you, because the investor fatigue is real. Adjusting your life to something different you're not used to without a clear picture of where you're going is going to kill you. So
Yeah.
once you have stopped the bleeding, can we get clear about where we want to go and why we're doing it? Because that will inspire you to work towards the clarity that you're getting to. And I want to emphasize before we close that it's important to start small. There are a lot of people who hear about investing and all of a sudden it's like, oh, let me let me just invest my whole gratuity when it comes out. Let me just put it all there. And then now, because you haven't realized that once the money goes in, it's going in for a really, really long time, because we're thinking retirement and long term, you start to feel frustrated and say investing is bad. Or you're someone who's struggling with alcohol, and then you're like, no, because I know that it's good for me, memory or whatever, I need to stop. You stop today. In 2 or 3 days' time, you fall back. So start little. If you're drinking 10 bottles a day, tomorrow drink 9. The other day determined to drink 8. Then just keep coming down, because it's just about doing small things every day. And I like at the end of the book how he gives that path to prosperity. And is it okay if I just go into
Yeah,
it?
please
Yeah,
go through that.
briefly. It says, set aside a short period each day during which your sole purpose is to become your own harshest critic. So here he talks about sit down, and that emphasizing the point about be honest with yourself. And then, as difficult as it sounds, it says, as difficult decisions are demanded of you during your working day, share the emotional conflict you are undergoing with your associates. So it's not easy, but have the conversations. So for me, when he gave these things at the end, and I encourage people to really go through this, because it's a lot of introspection. It's easy for me, Munyumba, you and I, to have this conversation, right? But we don't have conversations with ourselves. So throughout the day, we're thinking a lot of things. There's information coming in and out of our minds. But have you ever thought that for a lot of people, it's never structured? It's not like this, okay, where I sit down and take a paper and a pen and think about what happened today. Did I do well? Where can I improve? We really don't do that. But we have easy times having conversations with one another, and we feel like, oh, that was such a great conversation, and we neglect having that conversation with the most important project you will work on, which is you. And so if you're looking to have those important conversations that help you grow, this is a good model, I think, at the end, that talks about your path to prosperity, where he gives you tools and questions that can help you introspect and reflect. And that's all I have to add to that.
No, that's a perfect way for us to bring it down to a close. So, what have you gotten from today? Especially those of us who are looking to make improvements. What have you gotten from today? What are you building on? What do you have you looked at understanding yourself, valuing yourself, controlling yourself, balancing yourself, and to stop the self destruction? Where are we looking when it comes to the journey of getting to that better self? Because as he says, more money equals new you minus old you. And you always have to remember that whatever more you want to make requires a personal development. And this is why we're trying to reach into what has been said scripturally. So, what are you going to change about yourself? Comment below as well as to what you took away. Share this with somebody, and I'll be more than glad as we take into the next session where we look at our next commandment. Remember, there's 7 commandments remaining, and we're going more and more and more. And with that, I will close up today. I'm wishing you all a wonderful and blessed weekend. Bupe, have yourself a wonderful and blessed day.
You too. Looking forward to the next session. Bye, Munyumba. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.